Welcome to the second edition of Newport News Police Department's Conversations on 21st Century Policing. I'm Cheryl Chavers, Domestic Violence Specialist with the Newport News Police Department Domestic Violence Team.
And I am Neisha 𝘊𝘬𝘯𝘵, the Domestic Violence Outreach Liaison with the Newport News Police Department Domestic Violence Team. We're going to spend a few minutes talking with you today about our program and invite you to join us for a Q&A session on the department's Facebook page on Thursday, October 8th at 12 noon.
Hello, I am Cheryl Chavers, Domestic Violence Specialist with the Newport News Police Department. Delighted to be here today to engage in this conversation about domestic violence. I've spent 19 years working for the city of Newport News. The majority of that time was spent with the Newport News Department of Human Services, working with children who have experienced horrific abuse and neglect, and working with their families comprehensively to address the issues that bring them before us. And so that's providing support and safety and resources to address the issues the families are experiencing. And so it is indeed a pleasure to come in this capacity and work with individuals who have experienced domestic violence.
I am Neisha 𝘊𝘬𝘯𝘵, the Domestic Violence Outreach Liaison here with the Newport News Police Department's Domestic Violence Team. And as Ms. Chavers mentioned, this is just a dynamic opportunity to make change as it relates to impacting the community and bringing domestic violence awareness, helping those families and individuals who are affected, and just doing what we can to shed light on this truly dark epidemic. Just to give a little background about me, I am a survivor of domestic violence, so this is a very, very personal fight for me. So just to be sitting here at the table helping to make change, I mean, it's a great experience, and we're just here to do our part to help bring awareness and make change.
And so what we know about domestic violence is that it's very prevalent.
Yes.
And it's an issue that often takes place in silence. Many people don't have the opportunity to speak up about it. And so in this capacity, we have the opportunity to be the voice for the voiceless. And we have the opportunity to work with victims and provide a victim-centered approach to addressing their needs. We talk with hundreds of victims and assessing their situation, listening to them, not judging them, understanding some of the barriers that they face, and then determining what resources there are in the community to be able to help them. And so it really is awesome to be in law enforcement and to be a civilian working in this capacity.
And one of the ways that we're able to work in this capacity is that we offer training to officers. We work hand in hand with the officers who are going out to calls for service to provide assistance to victims and their families. We train officers on how to provide trauma-informed care, how to be empathetic to a victim situation, training them on the different types of domestic violence, understanding that it's more than just physical abuse. There's emotional abuse, financial abuse, digital abuse, the abuse that you can't see. And by being able to train officers on how to better assist those experiencing domestic violence, then we are able to make a greater impact in stopping domestic violence before it escalates.
And one of the most frustrating calls that an officer can respond to is a domestic-related call. And so we want to make sure that we provide officers with the tools that they need, that trauma-informed approach when they're speaking with victims, because truly officers are on the front lines when it comes to the fight against domestic abuse. So we want to make sure that they're engaging them in an empathetic and compassionate manner. And what we do know about domestic-related calls, that they're some of the most dangerous calls that officers can respond to. And so we're really pleased to have this opportunity for officers to call us, to vent their frustration sometimes with responding to domestic-related calls, and then to process with them and equip them with information. We're also pleased to have the opportunity when officers are on scene at times they'll call us and we'll have an opportunity to speak with the victim and just be able to process with her and be a listening ear, and then provide them with some suggestions to help remedy their situation.
And it's been really well received, whether the victim's female or male. We're getting positive feedback from both sides. Just to have someone call and say, you know what, I didn't know officers cared. I didn't know someone was going to follow up with me the next day to say, are you okay? Here are some resources. There's no pressure to move forward and do anything as far as pressing charges or doing anything like that, but Here's where you can go to get food. Here's where there are childcare options. Here's where you can go have a meeting with a counselor or go to a support group. So just to be able to offer this kind of this support to those going through it is great. I mean, as far as we know, we're the only one in the state of Virginia who has this type of program where we have civilians, advocates right in the police department working hand in hand with the victims, but also alongside of officers.
Yeah, and we get a chance to respond right after a crisis,
Right.
And talk to them, a victim, and ask them, how are you doing? Are you okay? What do you need? And it's in those conversations that we hear from victims that they're so pleased that someone is reaching out to them from law enforcement, just letting them know that we care. And so it really is a great opportunity just to provide that additional support and that listening ear that victims often need in the midst of their crisis.
Because the goal is to be proactive instead of reactive, because we want to stop domestic violence. We want to prevent it from occurring, and domestic violence escalates. So if we can get in there and provide that intervention before it gets physical, if it's in the verbal abuse stage, the financial abuse stage, if we can get in there and educate not just the individuals and families who are impacted by domestic violence, but the community, who can also help support that victim, who can also say, hey, this is where you can go for shelter, this is where you can go for job assistance, this is where you can go for temporary housing placement, things like that. It's about being proactive instead of reactive, and that way we can stop these simple assaults from becoming aggravated assaults and help a family get to safety. One of the ways, one of the questions we often get is about protective orders. We have victims who will reach out and they don't want the offender to go to jail or get in trouble or anything like that. They're not sure if the system can protect them. So oftentimes we'll hear things like, oh, well, a protective order is just a piece of paper. And we do understand the mindset behind that, but we really push you to get it. If we try to empower you to get it, because it's you taking a step to get your power back. You know what I mean? It's, how would you describe it? It's
part of using their voice.
Right.
And because power and control has been stripped from them, so here's an opportunity now to indicate, I'm establishing some boundaries. Right. I don't necessarily feel safe, and I would like to have some boundaries established around me. And so what we do, as Ms. Himes mentioned, is a lot of education. When we're talking with victims, we're telling them what are some next steps, some things that they can expect that are coming up. That is a trauma-informed approach, because the people that we've just spoken to have experienced a significant trauma. And so informing them about what is coming up next, in terms of you'll be contacted by a victim witness advocate from the Commonwealth Attorney's Office who's going to help you through the court process, educating them on the protective order process, that they can obtain an emergency protective order that can last up to 72 hours. Right. And then if they still feel some concerns related to their safety, they can then petition for a preliminary protective order. And then from there, if there are still some concerns, they may also petition the courts for a protective order that can last up to 2 years. Right. And then letting them know what resources are available in the community as well, that there are organizations that can provide emergency housing, that can provide the support that they need as they seek to rebuild their life. And so we do a lot of educating.
Right. And what we as a DV team can do to help, we can just be there. If you need that listening ear, whether you're the person experiencing the abuse or someone who is, if you contact us, we can sit and talk to you on the phone for as long as you need. You can come into the office and have a face-to-face conversation. We can connect you with resources. We have compiled a community resource list with over 160 resources on that list. That includes everything from emergency shelter, as we've spoken about, but also mental health services, child care, job readiness programs, things like that. We can assist you with going to court. Sometimes you just need that person sitting next to you, holding your hands through the process. We can connect you with, just if you have questions for the officer, not really understanding the court process, we will do that warm handoff to the Commonwealth Attorney's Office Victim Witness Advocate Program. We can connect you with the shelters, maybe help you speak with them, explain your situation a little bit better. So our goal is just bridge that gap between you, the situation, and the resources in the community that can assist.
And so we are really pleased to partner with our community partners. Community members are so integral in the fight against domestic violence, and the messaging that you all send to the community and to those who are impacted by domestic violence is really important. And so what we need the community to do is to be aware, to understand the dynamics as it relates to domestic violence, to understand the complexities, the nuances, and how difficult it is for someone that's experiencing domestic violence to leave that situation. And so we want to eradicate some of those myths associated with abuse, that it's just so easy to leave, or oftentimes victims may not have support. They feel isolated, like they're alone. So we need community members to provide that support, to be that listening ear without judgment, not putting someone down, but being there for them. We also need resources, because it's very difficult for a victim to rebuild their life after they've experienced abuse. Financial support is needed. Housing support is needed. Childcare support is needed. Employment is also needed. And so we're partnering with our community partners to see how can we provide these resources to victims at a time when they need it the most.
And essentially, that's our call to action for you as the community, because we can all do something. Doing nothing is not an option. So it can be something as simple as saying, are you okay? What do you need? Looking up resources for someone that you know may be experiencing abuse. It could be not victim blaming, as Ms. Chavers mentioned. It could be volunteering for your local shelter, donating, maybe you're doing spring cleaning or winter cleaning and you have some old blankets or household appliances or things like that, donating to your local shelter. All of these are ways that you can help stop domestic violence.
And so we thank you so much for partnering with us, partnering with law enforcement as we tackle the issue of domestic violence. And we know from a law enforcement standpoint that we can't do this in a silo. We can't do this alone. So we have to work hand in hand with our community partners, our community members, to be able to address this issue.
And we invite you to just stay tuned. We got a lot of things planned with Domestic Violence Awareness Month being October. We have an open mic coming up on October 10th at the Downing Gross from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. We have some PSAs that are coming out, some virtual discussions. So just please stay tuned with the Domestic Violence team. You can follow us on Twitter at NNPD DV team. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you again for joining the Newport News Police Department's Domestic Violence team for our conversation today. For any questions, please join us on Thursday, October 8th at 12 noon on the department's Facebook page. We will be more than happy to answer any questions you have at that time.
Follow us on our Facebook page to learn more about our next 21st Century Policing conversation from the Newport News Police Department.
Thank you.